Hey, you guys, my name is Terricina Jackson. I am the self-published author behind the Code of Silence, Dirty Little Family Secrets. So my therapist has challenged me to start promoting my book more often. I'm getting out here and speaking to the world. So I'm going to do some practicing because it's always like I could put my skill out there easy, but to do and be, Terricina Jackson, published author. I'm like Terricina Jackson, TLJ Business Solutions. Now I'm doing cannabis and cardio, which is just exercise, fitness, getting fit mentally, emotionally, physically, traveling that journey, but not the Code of Silence. Like I have just put this thing, picked it up, put it down, picked it up, put it down, picked it up, put it down. So today I'm going to read some of the book to you guys. I'm going to start out in the beginning of my story. Some of you guys know my story. Some of you guys don't know my story. Excuse me. So I'm going to read the foreword and the prologue. So the foreword is by Corletha Norman. I met her, exchanged energy with her in Atlanta. She's a trauma therapist. She wasn't my therapist, but we met as friends. So I asked her to write the foreword because she was heavily invested in working with people who, specifically children, but young adults who had experienced trauma. She says, "You know something my mother told me? She said that she wished I were a puppy so that she could take me to the pound and have me euthanized. I have heard and seen many things over the years as a trauma therapist. This statement is one that I have never forgotten. Imagine being a young child wanting nothing more than to make your mother proud, just to have her feel this way about you. Now imagine being in therapy sharing about this same scenario for the first time at age 50. 50 years plus. 50 plus years of silence, struggle, hurt, pain, isolation, loneliness, defensiveness, and compartmentalization. I do that well. The Black community is almost an unbreakable code of silence when it comes to sharing about the traumas and the hurts that we experience. For many generations, Black troubles of any kind were remedied within the family or the community. Anything otherwise created the possibility for external harm from those with power over the Black family or the community. And we're talking about slave owners, the Jim Crow era. I got a text message. And any sort of government system that's not been designed to assist the African-American community in getting any sort of mental, emotional, health care, any sort of access to things that are going to elevate us, right? So, and not wanting to share any sort of desire for progress with people who we know we're going to block that progress, but we've done it to our own detriment. So she goes on to say, we are not even comfortable with seeking the help that we need to heal with professionals that look like us, even current day. That resistance or refusal directly contributes to the continuation of some of the cycles that we find ourselves in. Some of those cycles are called domestic violence, rape, substance abuse, and molestation, to name a few. There are many individuals within our community that can recount the same or similar traumatic experiences, following down their familial lineage. Generations of women experiencing sexual trauma, a grandmother, a mother, an aunt, a daughter, and a cousin that have all been victims of domestic violence. These occurrences are all too common in our community. I think every woman in my family has been in a domestic violence relationship, including me, including my mom. On my dad's side of the family, for sure. I'm not sure about my mom's side of the family. I know that one of my uncles is very much a verbally abusive person, for sure. These occurrences are all too common in our community. We continue these generational curses by refusing to break them through intervention. No one wants to speak up. No one wants to heal. No one wants to repair. No one wants to change. After all, it has been that way, and we came out just fine, so they say. Just continue to pray about it and everything will be all right. Prayer alone is not enough. Where are the works that go along with faith? Status and image in society have continued to be made more important than our overall well-being. Status and image are gods in our communities. Generations ago, it was a method of survival to never show a weakness during slavery, civil rights, Jim Crow, and any other era and time in which we were held to this, Caucasian standard of living. We will still, while we still have some dangers to concern ourselves with today, we have greater options for support with mental health professionals that are a part of our own communities. Residual blockage from years of community protection continue to keep us from utilizing the resources that are here for us. We are shamed out of healing. We fear rejection and isolation that we know will come if we seek help. Essentially, we are manipulating our own loved ones into not getting the care that they need based off of historical fears. We are encouraged to simply sweep our trauma under the rug. How many other reasons can you think of that we will not have the necessary honest conversations in the African American community alone about our experiences with sexual molestation alone in the household? 1 in 4 Black girls, 1 in 4 Black girls, 1 in 4 Black girls will be molested by someone in the home or very close to the home by the age of 14. We don't even want to talk about the boys because they don't get reported properly. I think it's 9 in 10 Black women will be raped in their lifetime. Essentially, we are manipulating our loved ones into not getting the care that they need based off historical fears. We are encouraged to sweep trauma under the rug. How many other reasons can we give for not having this conversation? Holding back on having that conversation opens the door for individuals like myself to use unhealthy coping skills to deal with their own traumatic experiences. The code of silence leads us down a slippery slope to alcoholism, drug use, continuing that same trauma that was done to us, difficulty connecting with others. Unhealthy coping skills are one of the many reasons that you should encourage and support your loved ones into getting the help that they need. In addition, they also must work through their trauma stigma. Are they crazy? Are they too damaged to take part in society? I know crazy has been a horrible stigma that I've lived under, that dark cloud of she's crazy. And it's easy for people to go, oh, well, she's too loud, she's aggressive, she's this. So yep, she's crazy. Put her in a box and, take her out to White Pine and we don't have to listen to anything she says because she's crazy, no matter if I'm telling the truth or not. Are they too damaged to take part in society? Is it safe to be around them? There are various categories of trauma outside of what is widely known by the public. Direct trauma is first of the 6 categories. It is trauma that you personally directly experience. I call indirect trauma vicarious trauma, as the individual is not there to physically experience the trauma themselves, but they are still affected by what happened. Point being, I am still current day, 32 years later, affected by what happened to my father, because what happened to my father had a vicarious traumatic impact on my mother. Like, I literally am in the space of, I lost my mother and my father in 1986. I lost my father physically. I lost my mother mentally and emotionally. So chronic trauma occurs. Where did I go? Chronic trauma occurs when an individual experiences traumatic experiences repeatedly. This can be the same or different traumatic experiences. Trauma is considered complex when it is chronic trauma. Been there, done that my whole fucking life. That occurred during childhood years. A level of complexity is added due to the repeated trauma occurring to a child. Traumatic acts are occurring around an individual, but are not directed at the individual. Eventually, they are traumatized for simply being around. Of course, there are various causes of trauma, such as rape, war, military service, accidents, environmental factors, even racism, poverty, single motherhood. Let's add that to my book. Is goddamn mentally draining. In my time as a social worker, she writes, I think that the case of trauma sticks to me the most is one of a 2nd grade male that I worked with. He was misdiagnosed with ADHD. I got my title, my label last year. Labeled as a child with behavioral issues. He was easy to agitate, faced difficulty focusing and concentrating, disrupted class regularly. I didn't disrupt class by getting out of his seat and caused many disruptions while on school supplied transportation. He rode in a special bus that allowed him to be restrained in his seat. by a harness due to his history of getting out of his seat. I get it, because Malik was a soldier, baby. He was trying to jump off I-75 a few times. His seat by a harness due to his history of getting out of his seat and grabbing the steering wheel while the bus was in operation. After working with him for a brief period of time, I challenged the diagnosis. She said he had suddenly lost his father in a freak motor accident shortly after meeting him. He was anxious about someone else suddenly passing away while he was at school like his father had. This resulted in him being difficult to manage in classroom until he knew that his family members were safe and alive. He also dealt with a great deal of anxiety in vehicles, of course, if they drove faster in a manner that he considered to be unsafe. Thus, his grabbing the steering wheel of the school bus. After completing trauma therapy with him, all of his behavior subsided. He even went back to riding a regular school bus, all because a transparent conversation with a therapist had occurred. Trauma knows no age, race, career field, socioeconomic status. Anyone can be subject to trauma at any time, and we're all impacted by it different. So I'm gonna move on to the prologue. The prologue was written by a man that I met back in, I think, 2018-ish, going into 2019. Craig Samuels assisted me. He's from Flint, Michigan. He assisted me in writing the book. This was a journey, y'all. So the prologue, he talked about the sacred child. Blessings, beloved. Consider this an introduction to the introduction. Please join me if this resonates with your mind, body, and spirit. Far too often, we idolize our parents to survive the tragic reality of our childhood. We turn them into superheroes, when in all honesty, they are the boogeyman, monster under our beds. We create scenarios of safety zones in our minds and retreat there to survive the horror of what is playing out in our very real realities. And to reinforce the safe place that we have set up in our overwhelmed and confused minds, we disconnect from those realities to make it bearable. If I pretend it isn't there, then it can't harm me. In many cases, we must learn to embrace the nightmare we call home. It is the only way a young mind can even begin to make sense out of the nonsensical and rationalize the irrational. Embracing it somehow makes it seem halfway okay. You normalize dysfunction. And it's a journey to unlearn that, y'all. But what is really taking place is a fearful retreat into yourself, an act of introversion that causes our brains to shut off, and our cognitive reasoning for the purpose of protecting us from the unrelenting hand of trauma. At this point, one can say that our thoughts have become an ally with the removal of a certain degree of discord. And those same thoughts have also become our enemy, because regardless of how much denial we employ, we still know what lurks in our subconscious and is also being played out in our conscious state, making our realities that much more frightening. The sad truth about this is that our growth is stunted due to the inability to thrive, which is due to the atmosphere being non-conducive for proper development. That's where you see autism, at least in my opinion, ADHD, all of these different diagnoses, unresolved traumas in the early essence of your development. Another sad reality is that we grow up and we are unaware of these deficiencies until we try to enter into relationships of those we had or lack thereof with our parents. Oh my God. So just finding out that I even have an intellectual disability a year ago, like my whole life, like, girl, you smart. Okay, well, to some degree, I'm very much, able to comprehend and learn fast, but execution can be difficult for me in certain cases and scenarios. Unfortunately, we get lost as we're paralyzed from a lack of a map. No clue is how to get back to ourselves before the trauma, specifically me. Like, there's no a before the trauma. My mother carried me in her womb in a traumatic environment. So ain't no before. Before is before conception, because they was conceiving out of trauma. Excuse me. But how could we ever know what our true selves look like when all we have known is falsification of our original consciousness? The sacred child is like all children, is one whose narrative has been painted with a brush of compromised identity, and misfortune by unstable hands and minds of parents or guardians who are unfulfilled in their own lives. The sacred child is then robbed of the purity because the impure behavior of so-called adults and no boundaries. The sacred child is left with nowhere to go except inside of themselves to a make-believe place where everything and everyone is nice, a place where no hurt exists. Same place is also where they can become trapped inside their grieving process, something referred to as unresolved grief, where the mind tends to rehearse the very thing they are trying to escape from. I'm doing it with my mom. I'm like at the 5th stage of grief right now after like 30 years, guys. Whew. But I'm in out of there. This tends to set the stage for severe emotional and psychological instability. They become developmentally deformed. All this due to what was absent as it relates to the emotional neglect or the absence of a parent, not to mention physical trauma sustained over an extended period of time. Sometimes we grow stagnant by grieving over the idea of having parents, of who, what, and how our parents should have been, could have been, or would have been. To us, if only there had been some degree of normalcy. What would it have been like to have a mother's love, a father's protection, to even have a fraction of the Huxtable household? The sacred child longs to know this. They thirst for this. And so they end up in environments that are not healthy for them. They're empty. That void is yearning to be filled. We grow from the sacred child into a self-sufficient adult. Still can't bear the thought of being completely honest about who they are and who they never were to us. For me, it had to be proven to be too painful, even though it was them who was causing my pain. If I was ever going to come to realize what happiness felt like, I was going to have to stop trying to fix people, places, and situations that were not my responsibility to fix. Some people are comfortable in their brokenness, and you have to let them live there for as long as they choose to. For if you don't, you will lose valuable time, even years that you need so that you can properly put your own life in order. Don't become an accomplice in your own demise. Don't become a hindrance. Don't deny yourself all the good that life has to offer because someone else is unwilling to take the next step for themselves. Sacred child becomes the sacred adult who doesn't grovel for acceptance, validation, or approval. The sacred adult learns to give themselves permission to love themselves and to be okay with being apart from those who cause them harm. One cannot heal when they remain near their source of pain. How can wounds be mended when you are constantly being buffeted by the hand or the words of a person or people who are unhappy with themselves and don't want to see you happy? You cannot, which is why it's necessary to separate yourself for a time until you are totally detoxed from the intoxicating effects of insidious injections. The sacred child is not just a person, it is a place I have created that serves as a spiritual sanctuary for parentless children to reconnect with their inner child, who may still be trapped inside the maze of the unresolved grieving process. Sacred child is an opportunity for you to come in contact with others who have gone through and who are yet going through everything you may be feeling at this very moment. It is an opportunity for you to say yes to yourself, your purpose, your present, and your future. I am Terricina Jackson. I am a sacred child becoming a sacred adult. This is The Code of Silence, Dirty Little Family Secrets. Buy my book on Amazon.com. Thank you, guys.